All right. Welcome to Pop Culture Shark. I'm your host, Final Monkey, and with me is my good friend Caleb. Caleb, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Did you have a good week this week?
I did. It's mainly just been work and music and because that's the kind of stuff that I do is I'll go to work and then I'll come home. I'll work on some music. I'm a songwriter and I do my own recordings and whatnot. Uh, and I've just been watching watching stuff of pop culture. You got Boba Fett. You got Legend of Vox Machina, which is a fun show that just came out. But on the whole, pretty good week.
So let me ask you, we have not talked about Boba Fett since we watched episode one together.
Right.
So how are your feelings about Boba Fett?
So I personally am getting exactly what I expected. Um, However, I don't believe anyone else is getting what they expected. Simply because I Boba Fett's like one of my favorite characters in Star Wars, and so I had been keeping up with what they were doing, and
Okay.
and so it's like before Solo came out, Boba Fett was one of those Star Wars stories that was in development on the table, and then once Solo came out. And it didn't bomb, but it definitely didn't do as well as they wanted. They kind of pulled the plug on all of their Star Wars story movies.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, but one of them was Boba Fett, uh, and it was going to be directed by James Mangold, who did Logan. And so whenever they had a Boba Fett show coming out, I always kind of assumed that it would be sort of akin to Logan, very much a slow burn about a guy who's just kind of um, he's old and he's just almost obsolete, kind of like how it was in Logan. And so this is kind of what I expected. However, I think everyone else expected like Boba Fett to be like John Wick in space.
Yeah.
And that's not personally what I expected. However, I feel like everyone else did.
I feel like the show's a little schizophrenic tone wise. Like it's kind of like all over the place.
Yes.
And my other big issue is he won't keep taking off the helmet. I'm just like, leave the helmet on. But other than that, I don't hate the show. I don't think it's must watch like the Mandalorian
No,
was.
no.
Um,
And it's definitely telling whenever your best episode is the one without your main character in
right,
it at all.
right. um, I feel like it's out of order. Like I think if they had told the flashbacks first by themselves, like in order, and then got to the newer stuff, the show would have flowed better.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of COVID restrictions and stuff, so I'm sure that's part of the reason why they did things the way they did, and so
Yeah.
it's hard making a show. So I can't criticize them too much. But
Yeah.
I enjoy it overall. It's just I think it could be better, and I think it is getting better.
Hmm.
So we'll see how the season ends up.
Yeah. It, it it's very it makes me interested to see how like the other shows that they're making are gonna form because everyone was so excited about Boba Fett and they're a little disappointed because he never leaves Tatooine. Um, I mean, how do you think Obi-Wan's gonna go? Like, he either never left Tatooine, or he did leave Tatooine
I
and he just lied.
I I think he's gonna be on Tatooine for at least 90% of the show. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I agree. The Tatooine. I'm kind of tired of the desert, but I get it. It's cheaper to film there, and it has a lot of history of Star Wars. So I get it, but
Yeah.
my week's been pretty good. I watch a lot of bad movies. I like watching bad movies, a lot of rip tracks and stuff. I also watched Nobody, which I really enjoyed.
Oh, I love Nobody.
If you like John Wick, it is a definite recommendation. It's not quite the same as John Wick, but it's very similar. Same writers.
Yeah, yeah. Me and my friends, we saw that like opening day on a whim, just because it looked like John Wick, and we love Bob Odenkirk.
Right.
So it was it was so good, and like RZA's in it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. Good movie if you're looking for something to watch. And then I don't have time to rewatch some of my old shows, so it's kind of easier for me to just watch YouTube recaps of them. So I've been watching recaps of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, just to refresh my memory of what happened, and it's such a great series.
It's one that I still need to get around to.
It's amazing, simply amazing. And it's got a pretty satisfying ending, if I recall. I don't recall everything that happened because it's been like several years since I've watched it. But yeah, it's well worth the watch. All right, so let's get to our main topic tonight. We are talking about our favorite, not the absolutely best, but our favorite MCU movie. And how many are there? It's like 22, 24. There's quite a few.
It's something. We're almost in the 30s.
Yeah, it is crazy how many of these movies they've made, and not just how many they've made, but the quality of them. Most of them are at least above average or good. There are a few stinkers in there, but for the most part, they are all quite enjoyable.
Eternals.
I almost sat down to watch the Eternals the other night, and I saw the length of the movie. It's like I can't do it.
I mean, like, it might be one of the worst films I've ever seen. Like,
I don't know about that. I watch a lot of bad movies, but
well, at least bad movies are entertaining, like I was just bored to death the whole time.
Right. And again, Eternals, that's probably a whole nother live stream, but
we'll get to it.
It's one of those comic books I've tried to read, and I was like, this is weird. It's out there, and this is not something that is for general audiences.
It's not New Gods.
Yeah. So anyhow, so I'll start with you, Caleb. Caleb, what is your favorite MCU film?
All right, get out the pitchforks and torches. My favorite, now of course it's not necessarily the best, but my favorite is Iron Man 3.
Okay, so Iron Man 3, I know there's MCU movies, I'll see them in the theater, and then sometimes I don't ever revisit them. So this is one I have not really revisited. So my memories of it are foggy. I remember that there has to do with the extremist virus, I think.
Yes.
And how it would enhance humans, but they could overheat and explode or something.
Yes.
And there was a fake Mandarin running around. They blew up his mansion, and then I think Pepper gets armor at the end. Or I might be getting movies mixed up, but
no,
Pepper gets super strong at the end. That's right. She gets
extremist virus. Yeah.
I remember liking the movie. It's just not something that I revisited. So yeah. Sell me on Iron Man 3.
So Iron Man 3 is one that I particularly love for a couple reasons. I'm a big buddy cop movie guy. Like, I love movies. Like, my favorite movie of all time is The Nice Guys, also done by Shane Black, who directs Iron Man 3. And Lethal Weapon, Shane Black wrote Lethal Weapon. And then, Hot Fuzz. And so what Iron Man 3 really is to me is a buddy cop film, first and foremost. And I really enjoy, it's really got my sensibilities. It's really an MCU movie made for me, which is interesting because originally I actually didn't like it. When I first came out of the movie theater all the way back in 2013, I was not the biggest fan of it. And I thought that, it wasn't as good as the other two Iron Man movies. And it wasn't until, I revisited it quite a few times, actually. And I started to develop, because at the time, my taste wasn't as developed. I was just watching movies. But as my taste developed, and I started to really enjoy and understand what was going on, that's whenever I started to really like it. Um, as far as like the Mandarin stuff, I've never been the biggest Mandarin fan anyway, so that wasn't something that ever really bothered me. Like even whenever I didn't like it, that wasn't a problem for me. Um, but I think what I like about it the most is actually one of the complaints that people have, and it's the fact that he's like not in the suit as much. I've kind of always liked the superhero, losing his suit or losing his powers story. I've always been a big fan of that. Um, One of my personal favorites was there was a Batman Beyond episode where Terry's suit gets hacked by an AI, and so the line um, is Batman the suit or the man inside? It's time to find out. And so he just puts on the Nightwing mask and he goes and fights this AI that's got the bat suit under control.
Right, and that's always really cool to prove that someone's more than their powers. That they're what really makes them a hero.
Yeah. And in the previous movie, The Avengers, is when Cap says, "Take that suit off, and what are you?" And he says, "Billionaire, playboy, philanthropist." But it's really cool because what does he got? Like a hoodie, sunglasses, and he makes like these ornament grenades, which is super cool.
Right.
Now, I think my favorite thing about the movie, though, is something that unfortunately we've lost in a lot of superhero movies, which is the heroism.
Right.
A lot of like all of our superhero movies now at this point are really just the superhero fighting the supervillain.
Man of Steel, I'm looking at you. Where's the heroism?
But the scene where all the people are falling in the sky like from the plane, and so they do the barrel of monkeys thing, and he's just saving people. I'm a big fan of that. The other two best examples are, of course, the train scene from Spider-Man 2.
Yes, yeah, great scene.
And the bridge scene from Amazing Spider-Man, where he's saving all of the like lizards throwing the cars off the bridge, and so he's like save the kid or go after the lizard, and so then he saves the kid, takes off his mask. I'm a big fan of scenes like that. And unfortunately, I don't think Tom Holland's gotten that scene yet. Now he's getting close. He's winning me over, Spider-Man, at this point.
Yeah, he has was it the boat scene in the first one where it's like split in half, and
yeah, but that was his fault.
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to, is like every time something happens, it's his fault. So
I love all the Spider-Man actors, but Tom Holland, when he does emotional, he can really nail it.
Yes. That No Way Home is a whole other conversation, but I was just watching a clip of the three of them on the school roof, and I mean, it was just well acted. He was keeping up with Andrew and Toby just fine. It was great.
Yeah, it's just a great film.
But yeah, so yeah, Iron Man 3, getting back to that, it's one of those that hits my sensibilities, and it's well acted, and I quote it all the time.
Yeah, and a lot of these movies are based on comic books, so we do want to mention the comic book is based off of. There's a story by, I think it's Warren Ellis wrote it.
Warren Ellis, yes.
Yeah, Iron Man Extremis. So if you want to read the actual source material, see how it's different, highly recommend you check that out.
Yeah.
I am not a huge Iron Man fan. I never have been, but I do like Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal, and I do remember like Iron Man 3. So
yeah, my Iron Man is definitely, everyone's got like their versions of characters. My Iron Man is definitely the MCU version. Like the only Iron Man I've read is Matt Fraction's run. I haven't even read Extremis, honestly.
I don't think I have either.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of Robert Downey Jr. and his run on the character. So
Right. So a little setup before I get to my movie. When I started collecting comic books way back in the '90s, before the internet, before all that, I started out collecting Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic books with Archie Comics, and my neighbor, who was we had a neighbor kid, and his dad collected comic books, and they'd let us read some comic books. So I'd go there and just read all this stuff, and I had no clue what I was reading. You know, Amazing Spider-Man and X-Men and stuff. That's where I just kind of started learning stuff, was just going over there and reading comic books. So eventually I started collecting Amazing Spider-Man, and I remember seeing ads for this event called Infinity Gauntlet. And I was like, oh, this has everybody in it. I guess I should be reading this, having no clue what any of it was whatsoever. So I bought it, and all of a sudden I opened up to this whole other side of the Marvel universe I had never knew existed. You know, these space gods and these crazy concepts for like a young teenager. It's just kind of blowing my mind. It's all these concepts and this character, this Thanos and Adam Warlock. They're kind of like polar opposites of each other. Sadly, we haven't really got to him yet in the movie, so he's coming soon. But I just remember,
excited for that.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. But I just remember, I'm like, I thought it's a 6-issue miniseries. I thought it was 4 issues. So when I'm reading the comic book, I'm like, okay, here come the heroes. They're gonna win, and this is gonna be over. I know how story works. And Thanos just proceeds to murder everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, what? This is supposed to happen. Okay, well, they'll get the gauntlet. It'll be fine. Here comes Silver Surfer. And he misses. And I'm like, what? And there's like to be continued. And I'm like, what? So it's one of my favorite stories. So when I start seeing hints that Thanos is going to show up in the Avengers movies, I'm like, they're not going to go full Infinity Gauntlet, are they? And they didn't quite go full Infinity Gauntlet, but they did adapt quite a bit of it. So my favorite movie, it has to be Avengers Infinity War. It is. I mean, you can basically just rename the movie Thanos the movie.
Yeah.
You could also rename it Guardians of the Galaxy 3 or 2.5 or yeah. So go ahead.
I mean, what it reminds me of most, because before Infinity Gauntlet, there was like a 2-issue series called
Thanos Quest.
Thanos Quest,
Yeah.
and honestly, it reminded me most. Infinity War reminded me most of that, because really Thanos is the main character of Thanos Quest, and I think Thanos is the main character of this movie.
Yes, he absolutely is, and I feel like that's some of the problems Endgame kind of suffers from, is it moves away from being Thanos' story. Now it's back to being an Avengers story, and I found that less interesting, and it's kind of tonally all over the place and a little disjointed, and then it kind of picks up again at the end. But that's another discussion. But yeah, I love this movie. I mean, they did change Thanos' motivations from the comic books. In the comic books, he's in love with Mistress Death, who is the embodiment of death, and he's trying to impress her by wiping out half the universe, which is the snap that happens. So, I mean, they came up with a pretty good reason, and I've been reading some old comics, and that reason does pop up in an issue of Silver Surfer, where he tries to convince Silver Surfer that he's right, and he's explaining, the overpopulation and all that stuff. So it is kind of from the comic books. It's just not the main reason.
We don't, because it's not Lady Death, we don't get my favorite exchange, because the whole point of Thanos and Lady Death is he's in love with Death, but she has absolutely no interest in him. Before he gets the gauntlet, he is not worthy to talk to her, because she is this all-powerful being, and he is just some titan that it does not compare to Death. Once he gets the gauntlet and gets all of the Infinity Gems, and he is this god at this point, then Death won't talk to him because now she's not worthy to speak to him.
Right.
And I love that.
Yeah, it's a great book. And Adam Warlock's also great. And I'm so curious to see how they handle him in the movie.
I'm curious about Will Poulter because I've seen him in like 2 things, and he's always been like this scrawny, wimpy guy.
Yeah, but we've seen how movie stars can buff up.
Yeah.
I'm not so worried about that. I'm just curious how they're going to handle his personality, because like Mantis's personality, they completely changed for the comics.
Yeah.
So you just don't know what they're going to do.
I mean, they made Star-Lord Nova.
Yeah, pretty much. They kind of combined him and Richard Rider. We're both huge fans of the Annihilation story in the
Oh
comics.
yes, I love Annihilation.
I'm so hopeful that we will one day, and I keep hearing it's coming. Richard Rider Nova coming to the MCU. And if we get that Annihilation story one day, like if they do like Starship Troopers in a Marvel MCU, it'll be so good.
Yeah. What have you heard the report that James Gunn said that Guardians Volume 3 is going to be the last time you see this team?
I have heard that. My theory for a while, and this is apparently not what I've heard, is that I thought Star-Lord was going to die, and then the team would go their separate ways. I'm hearing other things that might happen. I don't want to get into spoilers. But yeah, I could. If you know your comic books, and we're talking about Infinity Gauntlet, the spinoff from Infinity Gauntlet is Adam Warlock in the Infinity Watch.
Yeah.
Where they take the Infinity Gems, and the team is Gamora, Drax, Pip the Troll, and Moondragon. So you already got 2 of them on the Guardians. I'm pretty sure we're going to get Pip, and I'm not trying to spoil things, but if you've seen certain movies, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then Moondragon's never been my favorite character. I mean, if they introduce her, great. But it's kind of weird because they've kind of changed Drax's backstory. Because in the comic books, he was originally human, and then he got transformed by the Eternals. I think it was the Eternals, right?
I think so.
The ones that are on Titan, Mentor, and all them.
Which they completely changed that with Eternals too.
Yeah, I have not seen Eternals, so I couldn't tell you. I've read a little bit of what the plot was. I heard it ruins Galacticus. I don't know. I haven't seen it. Like I heard it's a very similar plot to that or something. So, like I said, I haven't seen it, so I couldn't tell you. But anyhow, I don't think Infinity War is a perfect movie. I think that, and I think me and you have discussed this before, the Wakanda stuff is kind of boring at times. You're kind of just waiting for Thanos to show up.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where if you take it from the perspective of Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America as kind of 3 separate movies, you've got, Captain America and his team, Iron Man and his team, and Thor and his team. I really enjoy whenever we're with Iron Man and his team and Thor and his team. The Captain America stuff is not my favorite.
Yeah.
Plus,
it just feels like, we gotta have them doing something while we're waiting for Thanos to show up. And
plus the Battle of Wakanda is kind of just a retread of the Black Panther final act.
right.
It's which the Black Panther final act was a retread of the Gungans and Phantom Menace.
Yeah, it does feel like that. So yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of great scenes. They recreate a lot of scenes from Infinity Gauntlet when they're who's it, the Collector, when they're confronting them. That scene,
yes,
and Thanos is using the gems. Some of those things that happen are straight from the comic books. It's really cool. And then the ending. The ending is amazing.
Oh yes,
I love
haunting.
I love a good downer ending. Like, I don't want every movie to have a downer ending, but when you have that Empire Strikes Back moment of, oh crap, what do we do now?
Well, and that's the, I would argue that it's not even an Empire Strikes Back ending, because Empire Strikes Back, it's still pretty hopeful. It's, you know, Lando and Chewie and the Falcon, and they're going off. The last scene of Infinity War, you know, before the post-credit scene, is just everyone dying and Cap saying, "Oh God," and
Yeah,
that's how it ends.
the look on Cap's face, like, did we just lose? You know,
Yeah,
like they're not used to that, and it is such an amazing scene. Um,
yeah.
just a great movie. I love all the Guardians of the Galaxy parts. The
Yes.
part with Gamora and Thanos, it's so heart wrenching and so good.
Yeah, and
Just a
and
great
and
movie.
and that's something that I've always struggled with, actually. But the more I watch it, the more I come around to it. Um, is Thanos loving Gamora? It's always been something I struggle with, because I guess we just never had enough time with them together to actually see that. Um,
There's some
but
Infinity Watch comics dealing with her as a young girl and growing up with Thanos and stuff.
yeah,
So it is a little bit from the comics. It's just not a side of Thanos you see that much because in the comics he's so obsessed with Mr. Steph. So,
right.
um,
Um,
but yeah,
uh,
great film.
I
We would
think it's
love.
got.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I think it's got one of the funnier lines too. Like, "Why is Gamora?" is just a classic.
Right.
Um, and Batista just ad libbing that is great. Batista's a great actor.
He's
Like
come a long way. Really great. I, he says he's kind of done with Guardians or with Marvel after this next movie. He's probably right. A lot of those Guardians actors have not been happy with what happened with James Gunn being fired and rehired, all that stuff.
yeah, it was a
Um,
situation.
yeah, and we won't get too much in that. You can research it online. But I don't know, if it seems like James Gunn's kind of signaling he's going back to DC after this. There's rumors of more Suicide Squad spinoffs and all that. So that's a
And
shame.
I, but at the same time, I'm so down for that,
Oh,
because
yeah. The If you're a DC fan, it's great.
yeah,
But if you're
yeah,
wanting more, I was hoping to see more from him. Like I wanted to see the Ravagers with Sylvester Stallone and all that.
yeah,
Um,
that's definitely going to be a missed opportunity.
like even if it was just a Disney Plus series, I'd be fine with that. I just want to see more of those characters and explore more of the cosmic universe because what James Gunn set up was just amazing. Um,
Hmm.
so I
Yeah,
hope that they can kind of mend some fences. There's a lot of leadership changes at Disney right now, and keep him on a little bit longer to do some, set some more stuff up. That was the original plan before everything kind of went out the window. I mean, we get Nova and the Infinity Watch and the Annihilators or whatever they were called. I think they were called the Annihilators.
yeah.
Just some of
Uh,
those teams, some of the spin-off Guardians of the Galaxy teams, all that would be great. But we'll see.
yeah.
Maybe
And
Quasar.
and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this reference that I got in Infinity War. I'm a big fighting game nut. I love Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Marvel versus Capcom. Well, in Marvel versus Capcom 2, one of Thanos' special moves is a bubble that traps you, and you know, he's kind of a trap character. Whenever Star Lord is going to shoot him, he turns it into a bubble gun, and you can't tell me that that's not a reference to Marvel versus Capcom 2 in some way.
It could be, yeah. Um, that's such a great scene.
Oh yeah.
Now I want to go watch Infinity War. See, that's why it's a good movie. If I just start talking about it, I want to go watch it. Um, so we'd love to hear what your the audience's favorites MCU films are. Do you agree or disagree with us? I know a lot of people love Winter Soldier. We do
Mm.
too.
Oh
It's
yes.
just not number one on our list. I love the other Guardians movies. Or some other
Guardians,
favorites. What are
Civil
some of your
War.
other favorites? Um, what's some of your other favorites that you got?
Civil War is probably like my number two. I love Civil War so much. It just really, it hits me in the feels.
Yeah.
Uh, I think if anything is truly Like that's an Empire Strikes Back ending where, you know, they're split up and it's a really downer ending, but at the end, you know, Cap breaks everyone out of prison and says, "You ever need me, you call me."
Right.
And so that's a great one. I'm a big fan of Black Panther. I know that one's kind of a divisive one, uh, but a big fan of Black Panther. Uh, and Shang Chi. The if we're talking about a more recent one, I love Shang Chi. That's I'm you know, you're the one that introduced me to films like Shaolin Soccer and Kung Fu Hustle, and so
Right.
a an MCU movie that is kind of an homage to those films. Um, it's just great. It's another one of those movies that hits my sensibilities. That makes it one of my favorites.
For me, the other two Guardians movies, we mentioned Winter Soldier.
Yep.
No Way Home. It's still too soon to rank that one. I need to let that one kind of settle. It's definitely way up there.
Yeah.
Um, um, we've talked about before. When you see a movie out of the theater, you think of it one way. When you revisit 6 months later, it's a totally different experience. So
Yeah.
it just it's too new right now.
Yeah. I will say the best thing about No Way Home is that the movie, like first viewing, it won me over before the other two showed up.
Oh yeah, I felt the first act felt a little rushed. Like it was kind of like, oh, we were gonna do this other movie, but we're scrapping that. Let's get past all this issues
Mhm.
with let's get to the real plot here. Because the original plot was this to be a. I've heard Craven the Hunter. I've heard some wacky space stuff, but it'd be more about the legal issues and trying to fix everything. And then the bad guys showing up would be the end credit scene.
Yeah.
And then I think they just said, forget it, let's do this now.
Which I actually I do respect that decision. How even though I would have loved a whole movie with Spider-Man and Daredevil,
Yeah,
because Daredevil is my favorite Marvel comic book hero. Um, I think it was a good decision just because I don't know it. I was not a fan. I like Homecoming. I think is all right. Far From Home, I am really not a fan of, and so to really like reel people in who weren't on board with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, this was the way to do it.
right. And there was some wrangling behind the scenes of, is this going to be the last MCU movie? Is this going to, So I think when they started making, they weren't quite sure. Now they're definitely sure. Some of the rumors we're hearing about a lot more MCU films.
Spider-Man MCU.
Yeah. Spider-Man MCU films. The other thing is they kind of heard what the plans were for the Flash movie, and Marvel's like, oh, we could do that way faster and better. So they kind of beat them to the punch.
They've done that before too, which is really funny because they announced Batman v Superman,
Yeah,
and then that's why they did Civil War.
yeah.
Because if you remember, whenever they announced Captain America 3, it was going to be about the Serpent Society.
Yeah, I feel like that was a joke, but I also kind of wanted to see that movie.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
they announced it, I was like, I'm down for the Serpent Society. Let's go.
I honestly, I feel like now would be an interesting time because with Anthony Mackie uh, being the new Captain America, I think doing the Serpent Society with Sam Wilson as Captain America, I think that'd be really interesting.
You know what they should do is they should do more flashbacks of um, Chris Evans' time as Captain America in World War II. Like when they had that montage moment, you could slip some more stories in there, like, oh, he fought like the early versions of Zemo, or oh, the early versions of Serpent Society, and then skip to the future and have Sam Wilson dealing with, oh, this is the next generation of that threat.
Yeah. That those would actually be really cool to do for I think they're gonna go really hard on these these cartoons. They're starting off like cartoons that take place in the MCU. They're starting off with Spider-Man freshman year,
Yeah.
which I'm super excited about because I want to see kind of that homecoming homemade suit in action more.
Yeah,
And him,
as long as it's less Iron Man, more Spider-Man, I definitely want to
yeah.
see it.
But I think that'd be really cool to like get like a Howling Commandos cartoon.
Right.
Would be really cool. Um, just in general, I'm curious to see how often they go back because they went back with I'm not going to say they went back with Captain Marvel because that I mean that definitely had just some prequelitis. But Black Widow was definitely something they went back and they just put it in between movies.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see if they continue to do that or if Black Widow was just that critically unsuccessful. Because I know a lot of people weren't a fan of it. I myself included.
I still haven't seen either of those movies, Captain Marvel or Black Widow. So
Did you see Shang-Chi?
I did see Shang Chi. For the most part, I liked it. I had some issues with one moment it's a martial arts film, one moment it was a fantasy film. It was kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
I like the fight scenes. I'm curious to see where they take that. I'm hoping they bring on Fin Fang Foom, but we'll see.
I think, honestly, I think you got him in that movie.
Yeah, yeah. I thought for a minute when they were describing like they were looking at the ancient carvings of the creatures that were locked away. I thought they were describing vampires, and I thought for a second they were going to bring Blade in through this. You know, they were about
Yeah.
to release vampires on the world or something, but that's not quite where they went. So
Yeah. Well, they have had Blade in.
I've heard.
Yeah.
We don't
It
want to
was.
spoil too much of recent movies, but yeah, if you've
Yeah.
seen one of the recent end
Yeah.
credit scenes, he's
It was the
there.
best scene in that movie.
I would argue that maybe Pip the Troll showing up, but that he didn't even look that great. So that's another one of my favorite characters. So, all right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Again, this was kind of our test live stream to see how things would go. We might release it to YouTube. We'll see. But thank you for listening, and we hope to see you next week. We'll talk to you later.
All right. See ya.
See ya.